So, Matt, the grimmest of grim anniversaries.
I mean, as horrific as the day itself was, and you know, one remembers that day, and actually how quite slowly the scale and horror of the atrocities came through last October the 7th. I don't know about you, but I would not expect. I didn't expect that day. I knew that it would lead to carnage. I knew that it would lead to controversy. The region always does spawn those things when there's a conflict, as there was clearly going to be. What I didn't see coming was that by the first anniversary of October the 7th, we'd be pretty much in a full-blown regional war, where the questions being asked are no longer just what to do about Hamas, what to do about the civilian toll in Gaza, what to do about the future of the Palestinian people, what to do about Israeli security, the kind of immediate suite of questions that arose. But you've got people on mainstream channels today and yesterday, Sunday, talking about, I don't think Israel should bomb Iran's nuclear facilities at this point. Now, I don't actually think that's going to happen, but my point is simply that the speed with which, relatively speaking, with which you've moved from point A to where we are now is
incredible,
terrifying, and you know, one of the things that's difficult, I think, I don't know how you feel about this, but you know, normally on the podcast, I want to sort of, if I can, find some constructive and positive things to say, and seeing it as I see it, I don't. If one is looking for an imminent end to the bloodshed,
that's not gonna happen.
I don't see that, and I don't see that for quite a while, actually.
Because it's the thing. I mean, just to go back to the first point about how surprising the events of this year have been. The only comparable kind of shock of that day, although in all honesty, that the shock of 9/11 was superlative.
It was,
and probably. I'm just talking about as a human being watching something unfold in one day.
It's historic.
It's hard to conceive of how that could be surpassed in terms of absolute abject horror as a news event. But I mean, the Hamas atrocity came pretty damn close as it unfolded. You know, it was like ghastly, and it had so many layers to it. And of course, we live in the age where there's so much visibility of atrocity.
Yes, and it was live streamed,
and it poured in. Yes, and of course, anybody who hasn't been living under a rock for the last 50 years knew all hell was going to break loose. But having said that, if you cast forward in 12 months to say, as you've said, you'd have nearly 2 million people displaced. You'd have Gaza absolutely, effectively obliterated. You'd still have 60-odd hostages that we know of alive and being held as bargaining chips.
Yep.
You would have an Israeli attack on Lebanon, and you'd have an Iran attack on Israel.
And Hezbollah raining down missiles since October the 8th.
Yes, and to this day, on this day, still raining missiles into Israel.
And Houthis in the Red Sea, causing all manner of difficulty to shipping.
All in 12 months. It's incredible.
It is. But, I mean, so it exists on so many levels, this crisis. I mean, inevitably and understandably, the media zoomed in very quickly on Netanyahu and the civilian toll in Gaza. And I understand that. But I think today of all days, we should remember what made October the 7th so uniquely horrific. And that was that it really had no, in itself, direct military purpose. I mean, it was just an incursion into Israel to kill, torture, rape and kidnap Jews.
David Aaronovitch has written, who's got a really good Substack, I think.
Very good Substack.
And he's written a brilliant piece, which, well, there's no answers in it because there are no answers.
No.
But he repeatedly asks the question, is this what you wanted, Yahya Sinwar, the leader of Hamas?
Well,
what did you want? Has it played out?
The answer to that is, Yahya Sinwar, as I've said before, is a fascinating and underreported reported upon figure.
Yeah.
Because the first thing about him is that he's effectively the commanding officer of Hamas in Gaza and makes the key decisions. The great irony about him was that he was saved from death by brain cancer when he was in an Israeli jail in 2004, and then was exchanged in a prisoner swap. So he's here because of Israeli surgeons, which an irony which is not lost on the Israelis. However, I think what was in his mind was very straightforward, which is that, notwithstanding what I just said about the horrific character, shooting girls' faces off, after you've raped them, of what happened on the day, the intention was always to provoke a massive retaliation, and the battlefield had been set by Sinwar brilliantly. It was a TV set, really. Although the press has not been allowed in as much as it should have been, to my mind, in Gaza, he had spent the last decade and more building this extraordinary network of tunnels, but that was for Hamas personnel. So on the surface were civilians clustered around these facilities, which were also Hamas, operational headquarters, being used and put there as a human shield. So the inevitable outcome, even the most restrained response by Israel was going to lead to a lot of civilian casualties, and that is what Sinwar wanted. Always. And indeed, that's what his Iranian masters wanted too.
And then the flip side to that is you've got somewhere between 40,000 and at the upper end possibly close to 100,000 Gazans, the vast majority of whom are innocent, who have been killed.
I mean, what will determine how the history books judge this is what actually the ratio of civilian to Hamas.
But we'll never find
fatalities. I don't know.
Because there's Hamas sympathizers, there's Hamas activists, there's Hamas fighters, and then there's a lot of ordinary people.
The problem was, and it was going to be from the moment this started, that no Israeli government, I mean, the Netanyahu's involvement is in some respects a red herring. Yes, he's a bad man. I don't like him. I wish he wasn't prime minister. But Benny Gantz is writing in the New York Times this weekend. Chalks away. We should go through Iran. I mean, the gung ho side is not by any means limited to Netanyahu. By the way, if people don't know, Benny Gantz is a very different, much more centrist politician. He left the war cabinet, but his position is from a Western point of view not that distinct. No. So that was going to happen. And the problem is that it's been, in sheer military terms, quite effective. I mean, there are 24 Hamas battalions, and 22 of them have been put out of active use. Meanwhile, in the more recent weeks, the Israelis have put in place an operation against the Hezbollah leadership, which, just in sheer military success terms, has been phenomenal. So the difficulty is it's an endless.
Well, isn't just adding one dimension to it, which is absolutely critical, and which is where I completely take your point, and I completely agree. Actually, faced with that level of atrocity, and there was a woman on the radio this morning saying, "What do you think Keir Starmer would do if somebody came in and butchered 1,200 of your?"
Well, it would be
citizens?
35. Actually, on a per capita basis, it would be 35,000.
Right. So exactly. So I get that 100%.
But do we? You see, because we say we do.
Well, hang on. Let me finish the point.
All right.
Let me finish the point, because I do want to explore what you're about to say. But the political element that Netanyahu is dependent on far-right lunatics who actually, not only do they not want to enter the war, they actually want to go and occupy parts of Gaza and set up new settlements in Gaza. I mean, that's how nutty
that side is.
But he doesn't want the hostages back, does he?
Well, it's not. Look, put it this way. What Netanyahu personifies is actually something which has divided Israel, which is there are two goals. One is to destroy Hamas, the other is to get the hostages back.
And
right?
they're incompatible goals because if Sinwar is still alive,
yes,
you can bet your life he's surrounded by the hostages.
That's true, but there are a lot of Israelis, and not just of the right, this is the problem, not just of the right, who want done with Hamas. You know, and their view is, look, most of these hostages who are still in Gaza are probably dead.
Yes, but so the IDF, from what I researched, the IDF, there's 90-something still unaccounted for.
Yeah.
They believe there's 63, I think, still alive.
That seems to be about...
They will be in the tunnels with the leadership. So this is the absolute bone of it, isn't it? Is that those two goals, to wipe out Hamas and to get the hostages back alive, are incompatible.
Well,
it's impossible.
It appears to be so because it takes a while to degrade a force as established, which, by the way, has taken a lot of international money and turned it into weaponry. So yes, you're right. Probably this, Netanyahu's strategy is not optimal for getting the hostages back. But the only strategy that's optimal for getting the hostages back is to withdraw before the job is done. And as much as that's heartless, it is the whole thing is there is no non-heartless campaign.
But this is what is so unique about this particular...
And the region.
I was going to say the region.
Yeah.
It's so unique about it is that this is just a war of constant losers. There's no winners in it. And there doesn't seem to be the possibility of winning.
Let me challenge that slightly.
Yeah, please.
I think that Israel now, maybe wrongly, but it certainly thinks it might win. It thinks, okay, we're not going to get back all the hostages, but we are destroying Hamas, and we've absolutely decapitated Hezbollah. I mean, again, in the West, it's underreported how big a deal that is. Iran is clearly going to carry on bombarding us. I think that actually the position in Israel is not chocks away, but let's see how far they push it. We're going to destroy the Houthis, we're going to destroy Hezbollah, and we're going to destroy Hamas. And the reason we're going to do that is because it's high time we were allowed to win a war. Whatever happens in an Israeli-Arab conflict, the Israelis are told by the international community that they must de-escalate, that they have to start. When people call for a ceasefire, they're not calling on Sinwar. They're talking always to Bibi Netanyahu.
But isn't that because... I mean, I appreciate the shade of what you're saying, but isn't it also because Israel is a powerful nation state, and Hamas, what's left of them, are a guerrilla outfit now.
Well,
and so one point, it's very difficult to defeat guerrilla outfits in any conflict.
You can never complete them completely.
So yes, but this is my entire point, Matt, is that this is Netanyahu's stated aim. And with his back against the wall because of the far rights I
think the mistake you're making is to think that the only reason that this is happening is because of the lot that the far right have on him. Would that was so, because then you could imagine a different kind of government doing different things. I think the point is, the majority of Israelis do want Hamas gone. And of course, you don't get rid of all of them. But then we didn't get rid of all the Nazis in the Second World War. I mean, this idea you can't kill an idea is one of the stupidest claims that's made in these things. Because, there will be another generation of radicals. There always is.
Well, how many hundreds of thousands of young kids are growing up, parentless, brotherless,
lots,
motherless.
On both sides, by the way. And here's the other thing is that
but let me just say objectively, by a factor of about 30 more on the Palestinian side than the Israeli side. So if you're talking about trying to reach a point of regional stability at some point, you've got a generational army coming against you.
Talk about ceasefires. Don't break the ceasefire on October the 7th, 2023, like Hamas did.
Yes, I know, but that's in the past, isn't it?
Well, I mean, the recall of the past is, quite often made, not least by the Palestinians.
Yeah.
I think, one of the interesting things about this is that, on the one hand, you say Hamas is just a guerrilla army, whereas Israel is a civilized democracy. But Israelis have televisions, right? And they watch televisions and they see that in the streets of Western countries that are supposed to be their friends, there are young people. I was in I was in London on Saturday when there was this peace march, and as you know, I'm strongly in favour of the right to march. I've always been, I've written that for the New European constantly. However, I also reserve the right to call them idiots. And there were these white middle-class students wearing,
the checkered kind of Palestinian
shouting, "Intifada for the world, jihad now."
Well, they're just fucking idiots.
Yes, they are, but there are a lot of them.
I know.
And they've taken over campuses in America. So if you're an Israeli and you keep being told by Western politicians, "We're on your side, we've got your back," but can you stop now?
Isn't it a sensible grown-up government's job not to be influenced by
but I'm talking
by dickheads on the streets of London?
I'm talking about a country that is being attacked on 6 fronts.
Yeah, but you're suggesting, forgive me if I've got this wrong, you seem to be saying that they don't exist in a state of paranoia. They're right to feel that everybody's against them.
I think there has been a change.
Well, so my question is, regardless of what people think about their actions, surely it's the government of that state, Israel, only responsibility really is for the long-term peace and stability of its own people and its actions. Now, the response, 100%. And then again, I know I'm going to be people saying, "Oh, so you're the one that's going to say how much is too much." Well, yeah, to a degree. I think by common consensus, it's been too much.
That Israel rightly says, "Oh, I see. So we have more responsibility for the civilians in Gaza."
Yeah.
Than its own government does.
I think that's correct.
Right, but then we the West reserve the right, and politicians do use this language, not just students, to call it colonial, to talk about apartheid. There are Congress people in the US, there are MPs in this country, who talk about apartheid and colonization. Which is it?
Well, I know, but I mean, we both want a two-nation state, don't we? I mean,
we do, but I mean,
but that's never going to happen. Like with this mindset, is it?
Well, when you say mindset, who are you talking about? Because
I'm talking about both sides.
Well, hold on. Israel has a democracy. It could change, right?
Yeah.
Hamas and Hezbollah are not democracies, right?
Yeah.
They are Islamo-fascist terrorist forces run by Iran, right? And their principal purpose, other than to kill Jews, is to prevent a two-state solution. I mean, it's sort of like a catechism. Politicians issue. They say we want security for Israel and we want a two-state solution, right? Great, but show me the Palestinian force that wants a two-state solution. They've been offered it in 1937 by the Peel Commission, in 1947 by the UN, in 1967 when the Arab League turned it down, in 2000 when Arafat turned it down, and then in 2008 when Mahmoud Abbas turns it down. So, the two-state solution has never had a Palestinian agency behind it. And there's no way I can see any good actor at the moment, and nor was there, frankly, before October the 7th, much less the Israeli retaliation.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't want there to be bloodshed, but it's very hard to observe what's happening and to not think, well, where did this really come from? And where it comes from in the end is that the dominant forces, as long as Israel is unable to form a pact with Saudi, the dominant forces in the region want Israel to stop existing. And when you are an Israeli, that focuses the mind.
Well, for sure. And that has been, as you say, that's been the case since the 1930s.
Yeah.
I mean, and a lot of people would say, well, a lot of that sentiment is driven by the fact that Israel pushed out a lot of Palestinians from their home.
Yes,
and they were totally displaced.
As Jews had been displaced from Arab countries.
Yes,
it was but you see,
but arguing that it was quid pro quo it doesn't make it any less bitter for the people on the receiving end. Does it?
And a lot of Jews didn't want to be kicked out of the countries they were kicked in. They were kicked out of, but they were. Matt, they were.
And then we were on the back of a genocide. A literal genocide.
I mean, half of European Jewry had been killed.
Yeah, I know that. Yeah.
Right.
Yeah,
but so
and I do. But again, and I do understand and this, by the way, and regular listeners will know this is all in the spirit of constructive brotherhood.
Totally,
and love.
no, completely.
But this is where the nuance and the difficulty of the argument, where people are willing, in keyboard warriors in the UK are willing to sit there at their Twitter accounts and start accusing Joe Biden of genocide for doing this. I mean, it's fucking ridiculous. Moronic.
Yeah.
Not only is it moronic, though, it is playing into a narrative that underpins the whole conflict in the first place, and it's not solution based.
Yeah.
It's antagonism based, and it's actually, I think, as desiring of conflict as the side they claim to hold
dialectical. It relies
really
on
is,
yes. And let's sort of reframe it a bit. Shimon Peres said the problem's not the light, it's the tunnel, right? I love that.
Yeah.
You know, I think we both agree, of course, two-state solution, secure Israel, right? But getting there is now harder than it's been for a very long time. Okay, let me be really, super optimistic, okay? I mean, let's really throw things up in the air and see what happens. Let's say Harris wins, right? Now, Harris is not like Biden. She has no sort of Zionist deep roots, right? So she has the capacity to be an honest broker in all this, right? Let's say the EU really steps up to the plate.
Yeah.
And let's say, and this is the bit of it that I'm not sure about, the UN really steps up to the plate and says, look, guys, let's say the conflict is beginning to calm, right? The key then is twofold. It's that there be some form of oversight, particularly in Gaza, that's acceptable to both Palestinians and Israel. And I think that's going to involve blue beret people or Arabs wearing. I don't know. But
and by the way, mate, can I just make the point about there's 44 million tons of rubble in Gaza now. It's going to take 15 years to clear the rubble.
A fucking shed load of money.
Yeah,
right.
Yeah, huge amounts of
money.
Just
more money than Marshall had in mind when he did the Marshall Plan. Which is, look, if you want a two-state solution, actually, you're going to have to stop paying in blood and start paying in treasure. Yeah. Now, that will be a test of what you and I believe in passionately, which is what is still called the international community.
Yeah.
Right. Let's say that things have calmed down a bit. Netanyahu's long gone. Hezbollah has stepped back a bit.
Yeah.
Hamas is, off the pitch for now.
Yeah.
That's the moment where if Harris is elected and is inaugurated January 20th, and I'm crossing my fingers as I say that, she decides to become remembered.
Yes, what a legacy that would be.
And Ursula in the EU, and the bit that I don't believe happening, the UN. So there may have to be a different global forum, whether it's the G7 or the OECD, where leadership says, look, what we've just seen in however long we're now talking about, that can't happen again. And that requires leadership. It requires, I'm sorry to say, boots on the ground. Boots on the ground that are acceptable to both sides, and that's bloody hard, right?
Mate, let me say,
and more money than God.
That, at least, as unlikely as that.
Well, it's something, isn't it?
At least that is a plausible scenario to an end game where people emerge from the pit of darkness they're in.
I mean, it oddly enough, it's and I don't want Trump to win at all, but the one sensible thing Jared Kushner, who knows the area like the back of his hand, has always said is that you've got to make these parts, you've got to make the Palestinian territories like Dubai. Right? You got to, and I think that's often interpreted, and perhaps it is, as just another example of Trump Inc. looking for beachfront. But I don't think that's just what he means. What he means is, if you want these parts of the world to be what they have to be, which is a viable state, right? You can't just say, here's democracy. This is the great mistake the West always makes, which is throw them Jeffersonian democracy and everything will be fine. No, they have to have great jobs, gleaming buildings. The trust, the international community is there to send in the diggers, rebuild from the ground up.
Well, mate,
that's a great project,
and that's the only way. By the way, all of those hundreds of thousands of kids who are going to otherwise
will
grow
be
up
very angry
people. if you give them an alternative future, then you've got a chance.
Oddly enough, when Ed Balls was at the Treasury, he spent a lot of time in Israel and Gaza and the West Bank. And I remember him saying, in the end, the solution is primarily economic. He said, if you can make these places so bounteous, then it's like Northern Ireland. You create an incentive for the Israelis to say, come through the border because we want your fill-in as applicable, services, goods,
tourism money,
everything. Now this is it's optimistic to the point of being Panglossian. But I think it would be sad to, on this day, not to have a
glimmer of hope.
And also something we keep coming back to in the podcast, which is the role of leadership and human agency. There is one approach to this, which is to say Israel's on its own, just leave it, let it be, come back in 10 years and count the bodies, right? The other is actually, there are ways the international community, which is in a fucking desperate state, by the way.
The UN is a abysmal failure.
The UN is in such a bad state that I'm beginning to wonder if it really is fit for purpose.
No, I'm sure. I can tell you my point of view. Tell me the last thing it did of any constructive purpose.
Its involvement in this, its involvement in the pandemic was pitiful.
Well, let me tell you another shocking fact, which is the front cover of our edition this week.
Oh, it's a very good cover.
The world is at war. There are 59 wars and conflicts.
Stunning.
There's never been as many wars and conflicts as there are today. And so when we talk about the absolute horror that obviously today is being magnified.
It's
because
part
of the
of
anniversary. But let's remember the people who are fighting in Ukraine, the
Africa.
people in Sudan, the people in Syria. Half of Africa is at conflict. It's incredible.
And and now we're sort of talking Geost Strategy, but why the hell not? It's a Monday. One of the things that's happened as countries become more isolationist and the world becomes more multipolar is that there's more disorder and chaos. And what we need desperately in the second quarter of the century are people who are like George Kennan or, with that level of international brains to come up with ideas that reorder the international order as it is now. Because we're not going back to the Cold War. And we're not even going back to the immediate aftermath of the fall of the Berlin Wall. That's all gone. So I have no glib answer to this at all. But, we do want the world to have a measure of order, and the enforcement of that order is not really happening at the moment. And I do wonder whether it's time, just as one thought, is it time to review the membership of the UN Security Council?
100%, yeah.
Things like that.
Listen, all I know is you can't perpetuate this club, this bloody club on the Security Council, this dysfunctional club,
which just vetoes,
with everybody has a veto,
each other,
and it's a fixed membership with a couple of guests.
Yeah, and why is India not on it?
Exactly.
How does that work?
Exactly. Right. Listen.
Right.
I think we did quite well there. We got to a positive thought.
Yeah.
Thank you for that. That's
and
brilliant.
Sending lots of positive thoughts and vibes to everyone in the region, and
100%.
hoping that peace comes, very soon.
God willing,
inshallah.
Exactly. Right, we're going to come back in a minute to talk about something slightly less important, but still quite consequential.
Quite consequential.
This podcast is brought to you by the subscribers of the New European newspaper. The New European was set up to fight against the iniquities of Brexit, and we carry on fighting the good fight against corrosive nationalism and right-wing media to this day. Not only that, though, it's a great read every week, full of fantastic cultural articles, political insight from across the continent, great writing, including my dear friend Matt Dancona. So sign up and join the community of readers that have made the New European the fastest growing newspaper in Britain. We'll give you a free Bollocks to Brexit passport cover when you join from just £1 a week. For £1 a week, that's less than the price of a bottle of water, you get all of our digital content, archive, puzzles, the lot. For just £1 extra a week, you'll get the actual newspaper delivered to your door first class. You can't spend £2 a week better than that, folks. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk 2 Matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. Sign up today and join the fastest growing community of newspaper readers in the country for a reason. So, au revoir, Sue Gray. Thank you. Don't let the door hit you on the backside on your way out.
I know.
She's gone. What do we make of it?
She's gone.
Yeah.
As Hall & Oates once
Do you think
sang.
most people know who the hell Sue Gray is?
Well, you see, this is the thing, is that normally the sort of people who are routinely described, as our great friend Alistair Campbell was described as, the real Deputy Prime Minister or the Darth Vader of the administration, get a bit of a run-in, so that people get name recognition. But poor old Sue Gray, I mean, she became Keir Starmer's Chief of Staff in opposition last September. So she's barely lasted in the role for a year. And
was seen, by the way, as a massive coup, wasn't she?
It was huge. It was huge.
Like a masterstroke.
She'd been the propriety and ethics, supremo in Whitehall. She knew Whitehall like the back of her hand. Yeah. She'd done brilliantly the Partygate report, for which Boris Johnson will never forgive her, which is much in her
very much on the credit side.
To her credit side. I mean, the interesting thing about her is our friend Tom Baldwin, in his very good biography of Keir Starmer, got the only interview with her. Yeah. And I went back and had a look, and she was, it was very clear that she was, in Starmer's view, there to set up, a plan for government. Yeah. Which was, things like planning and devolution and, quite hardcore sort of policy
which is what
stuff.
Chief of Staffs do, isn't it?
Well, this
what
is
Jonathan Powell would have done.
Exactly. You see, the chief, because of her knowledge of Whitehall, which was total. Her job, as with Powell, you're absolutely right. That's the key precedent, was not to do what Alistair and Angie Hunter, Blair's personal advisor, were doing, but which was being out there doing comms and fighting fires and so on, but to get on with the business of government, talking to the cabinet secretary all the time, blah blah blah. So the charge sheet against her was that she was a control freak, that she wasn't doing a grid of stories, which I wouldn't have thought would been her job anyway. But anyway,
this is what surprised me as it unfolded, is that she, well, as the narrative has had it spun, was insisting on control of the communications. Yeah, and that's where she's fallen down. If that's true.
You see, I don't buy that.
Right.
What I buy is this, and the thing about this is that it's happening. Everything's that we always say this, that everything is happening faster now. Yeah. We said it in the section on October the 7th, there's an accelerationism at work in everything. Yeah. So normally the first reset of number 10 takes a little bit of time. I mean, it always happens, but I guess for the Blair government, the first comparable thing was when Peter Mandelson, who was Minister without portfolio, had to resign over his mortgage. And that was in July 1998. And then there was Steve Hilton, who was David Cameron's senior advisor, and he resigned in March 2012, almost 2 years in. And Dominic Cummings went in November 2020 after 16 months as senior advisor. And and then another one is Theresa May, the two chiefs of staff, Nick Timothy and Fiona Hill.
I've forgotten about that.
They lasted until June 2016, and so they had 11 months. But here we are, only a few weeks into the...
It's amazing.
And we've had the first reset. And the reason was that, I mean, look, the government's had a pretty lousy start. With fuel allowance and freebies are the two things.
Can I caveat that? Because I keep looking at the front page we did a month in, which said flying start, and it had Keir Starmer.
Yeah, but that was before.
And so I think they did have a decent month. And everything went to pot.
The riot, I thought he handled brilliantly.
Yeah.
But the freebies and the winter fuel allowance things were just, they were boo-boos.
It's interesting, Alistair was on Radio 4.
He was on the Today programme.
Yeah, he was, and brilliant as ever, and said he made the comparison with the amount of time between winning the election and the first budget.
Yes.
And he said, if you go back through all of them, right, it's all 6 weeks, 7 weeks, 8 weeks. And we're waiting 16 weeks for the budget. And the truth, you forget that lousy King's speech and all my government
mission-led.
But people are waiting for the budget.
Yes.
And that's the thing that will sort of create the master narrative.
Yes.
And so instead of that, what we've got are a couple of little tactical responses to things. The winter fuel allowance, the panic over the free clothes and all of that business.
Bit of assisted dying.
Yes, exactly. You know, and a few other sort of specifics. GB Energy, great tip.
Great.
You know, plan for worker relations and
but
all
it's
that.
all less than the sum of its
bits,
parts, isn't it?
So
it's
you haven't
like
got this
bitsy.
narrative, this big narrative about this is what we're about.
So we were talking, I remember on a previous pod, about the rumours that Jonathan Ashworth was going to come in, and John Ashworth was going to come in and run number 10, which would have been a classic move. But what you've actually seen is not that. You've seen a factional victory, which is that Morgan McSweeney, who I think we can say with fair certainty was at war with Sue Gray, and had been for a long time Keir Starmer's sort of campaigns director, political director, is now his chief of staff. Has taken over from Sue Gray, which means that you've got a politico. And they brought on a number of people. Vidya Alexson has been made deputy chief of staff, as has Jill Cuthbertson and James Lyons.
Tell us about James Lyons. Do you know much about him?
He's been at TikTok, I think, recently, hasn't he?
Right.
I think so, yeah. But I mean, he's got a background in the lobby.
And he's going to be the comms guy. He's going to be the Alistair Campbell, is he?
He is, in many respects, in all of this, the most important appointment, because he's the guy. He's described as heading up a new strategic communications team. Now that's Campbellian language, right? Yeah. The bringing together of strategy and comms, and we'll see how he does.
Yeah, no pressure.
But you know, the question is, was it just a factional victory, or will it actually make number 10 better run? I really don't know.
One question I have in all of this is, there's a slight sort of, I mean, you can read it two ways. Either Keir Starmer has sat down and in short order said, this is a car crash, I'm going to do something, act decisively, and I'm changing everything. And I'm sorry, Sue, much as I love you, you've gone, right? Because it's been a fuck up, right, so far, right? Or you can say, well, Keir, did you really need a chief of staff to tell you that taking where were all these free suits coming from? And so your culpability in this is quite clear. Where does the buck stop?
I really don't think it's Sue Gray's fault that they all took free clubber and went to Taylor Swift for free, right?
And what's interesting is that where she's been dragged into that is, and she gave him a pass for Downing Street. Well, so what?
Right? So what? I mean,
what was he going to do? What was he doing? He wasn't sitting in cabinet, was he?
No. I mean, I think the point was there had to be a scalp.
Yes.
Right? As there always does in these things. The question always, to me, and you've already answered the point really, is that actually it's the oldest trick in the political book, and it goes back to before when the Stuart monarchy used to talk about evil counsel.
Really?
Blame the advisor, right? Now, how often, if we're honest, has changing the advisors made a difference? And actually, the only one that I can think of that might have kind of count is, and it's not quite an advisor, but he was a sort of fixer and enforcer, was when Mandelson was brought back, very surprisingly, by Gordon Brown in June 2009. There are a lot of people in the David Cameron team who think that decision denied them a Conservative majority.
Really?
In 2010, because and this may be because they worship Blair and Mandelson and all of his, but they did say, you could see a kind of crispness and a directness to Brown's political operation after Mandelson arrived.
Where is Mandelson these days? Because he was bubbling around, wasn't he?
He keeps briefing the press that he's going to go to Washington as ambassador, which is, right. I think. But I think, by the way, another thing that needs to happen in all of this is they desperately need to fill the cabinet secretary job.
Yeah.
And there's a guy called Ollie Robbins who has more or less briefed every newspaper in Britain that he is the right person to get it, right? And he was one of our Brexit negotiators. So I personally rather feel he's not necessarily the person it should be is a permanent secretary called Antonia Romeo. She's the permanent secretary at Ministry of Justice, and she had the sand to stand up to Dominic Raab. She's universally recognised as being a moderniser and a deliverer. She's got real energy, and she was a serious contender to take over from Mark Sedwill when they gave it to Simon Case.
Simon Case.
So I hope it's her.
Yeah.
I fear that there's a lad side to Keir Starmer's brain that and Ollie Robbins is sort of that he's being quite successful at making it fait accompli, but it should be Romeo.
And we're left with the question, which hangs in the air behind all of these things: is Keir Starmer actually any good at politics?
Well, not.
And we're going to find out, aren't we?
Not so far.
Yeah.
It's a bit early to say definitively that he is. I mean, we had David Brent in the Q&A yesterday, didn't we? Which is fairly sort of, as metaphors go. It wasn't. I think that he is not necessarily as terrible as he seems at the moment.
Yeah.
But what I do think is one of the defences of Starmer that is made by many of his allies is he does things at his own pace. Well, fuck off. That you can't. The pace of a job like Prime Minister is set for you by the times in which you live.
That's right.
At the moment it's warp speed.
There's a strange
he's not Harold Macmillan,
it's when he says I'm prepared to be unpopular. Well, all right, yes, well you win in that race, mate.
Fortunate.
But actually, it's your job in this immediate circumstance
to be quite popular,
to do what the people wanted you to do.
Yeah, and also
by the way, can I just say one specific, which may come as a massive shock to listeners, but get a grip of all of this I'll make Brexit work shit.
Yes,
no one wants to hear that.
Nobody wants to hear it, but I fear we're going to hear a lot of it. I mean, being unpopular for doing big, gutsy things, that's one thing.
Yeah.
If you risk unpopularity because you're taking, you do something which is politically perilous but to the good of the country.
Yeah.
That is in bucket number one.
Yeah.
Being unpopular because you're crap is in bucket number two.
Being unpopular because you're going to deprive pensioners of fuel allowance and take free clothes is
suboptimal.
Is like bucket number 27.
And I do think you're right that, I mean, I think even Brexiteers will get sick and tired of hearing him saying he's going to make Brexit work. Yeah. First of all, because he won't.
You absolutely hit the nail on the head there, because Brexiteers will never believe he's the guy to make
they won't.
Whatever they think Brexit working means. They think that's Nigel Farage.
Yes, exactly.
And then you've got the rest of the planet who's looking at Brexit thinking this is the biggest shit show ever.
Yeah.
Don't keep saying you're going to make it work.
Yes.
You won't. You can't. It never will.
No, he keeps saying 2 + 2 is 5 if you look at it from this direction.
That's right.
If you look at it from on top, you'll see that 2 + 2 is in fact 5, And I actually think that we sort of grudgingly tolerated his nonsensical Brexit line before the election.
Yeah.
But now I'm seriously fed up of it, because it is rubbish.
Yeah.
And the polls show that the public is just waiting for deliverance from this. Yeah. I mean, again, we talked about big moves in the first segment. What a great social democratic Labour move it would be. Yeah. Just to make a speech. I don't know where you'd go, whether you'd go to Runnymede or somewhere that would, be all patriotic and everyone could feel nice and safe, or the cliffs of Dover.
Just stand there on the white cliffs of Dover. With a big flag.
Or stand on top of Gareth Southgate or something like that, right? And make a speech in which you say, look, guys, I'm a patriotic internationalist. And I've done the math, and I've looked at the figures, and Brexit is just an unmitigated shit show. And notwithstanding everything I've said before, I've changed my mind, and you have too, and that's perfectly clear. And so this is how we're going to apply for it.
Why can't it happen though? Why is it fanciful? Why can't who's the Richard Curtis? Why can't Richard Curtis just write him his bloody speech? Give it to him like Hugh. Is Richard Curtis?
Yes, Hugh Grant with Billy Bob Thornton.
Love Actually or whatever it was.
Yeah,
and let him come out and be the man we want him to be.
Yeah, well, I mean, I want him to be tougher than Hugh Grant, really, I have to say. I think Hugh Grant going, yes, well, there are times when a country has to, and this is one of them, and dancing around number 10.
Come on, he was great.
Well, maybe. But I think... come on, Kiss. It's like that wonderful Arthur Putey sketch in Monty Python where, are you a man? Or God says to him, are you a man or a mouse, Arthur Putey? Well, Keir Starmer, are you a man or a mouse? Well, what do you want to be remembered for?
Yeah, exactly.
Do you want... I don't know, actually. I mean, exactly. I do worry that there's part of him that just wants to be remembered as a competent technocrat with quantity surveying qualifications and I ran the CPS.
Yeah, but what we know about him is that What we know about him for sure is that he is capable of connivance and
he's a ruthless
and
bugger.
being devious and finding a way to get his way. Well, come on, show some of that steel on behalf of the
and
nation.
also, define winning doesn't stop the moment you get into number 10. It just starts,
That's
right?
Correct.
And you're not playing many winning moves at the moment, mon ami, right? and you're it's not going to get any better, right? Because at the moment, Reform only has a few MPs, and the Conservative Party is in a sort of
this strange alternative universe,
crappy Rotarian version of Coachella going mad, right? So that's as good as it's going to get, right? Yeah. And if you can't do it now,
right. On that bombshell,
on that rude and extremely unpleasant bombshell,
I enjoyed this podcast.
I had a great time.
I found it quite cathartic, and I enjoyed the first half.
Very much so.
Discuss this stuff. Thank you so much for listening and bearing with us if you made it this far. Don't forget to send in any feedback and questions to 2matts@tnepublishing.com. That's the number 2, matts@tnepublishing.com. If you want to do something brilliant, subscribe to the New European. Brilliant. We'll give you a brilliant bollocks to Brexit passport cover. You can get all our journalism for £1 a week on app and website, or for just an extra £1, and this is a saving, folks, of about 80% on the cover price. We'll send you our brilliant award-winning newspaper to your door every week for just an extra £1. Go to theneweuropean.co.uk/2matts. That's the number 2, MATTS. And there's a link in the show notes. Thanks as ever to our team at Rethink Audio, led this week by the magnificently bearded Ollie Peart. And until Friday,
when we will be coming from a secret location, to be revealed.
We have got a great.
Have we got plans for you?
Yeah.
That's how good.
See you on Friday.
See you on Freitag.